Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. South Korea's under-20 football team returns home to a hero's welcome after rewriting the country's football history by coming second in the under-20 World Cup. Protests in Hong Kong swell despite the government's back down on a widely detested extradition bill. Hundreds of thousands flood the streets, saying it's not enough. They want the bill scrapped altogether and the leader out ASAP. Plus, the US is taking action to make sure it understands the risks and threats posed by North Korea. This from US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo when asked why President Trump wouldn't allow US intel agencies to spy on the North. We start with a welcome reserved for sporting heroes. South Korea's under-20 football team is back home this Monday after finishing runner-up in the FIFA World Cup in Poland, achieving the best ever World Cup finish among all age groups. On the men's side, the young Taeguk Warriors will attend what's sure to be a pulsating welcoming ceremony in downtown Seoul in a couple of hours' time. But before that, our Kang Hyung-woo reports from Incheon International Airport, where the squad were greeted by a huge crowd of fans and media.
Deafening cheers and camera flashes lit up the arrival gate. The source of the excitement, the South Korea men's under-20 football team. Finishing second at the FIFA Under-20 World Cup in Poland, the Taeguk Warriors arrived home Monday morning to a hero's welcome at Incheon International Airport.
We said our goal was to win it, even though we couldn't pull that off. We have no regrets because we gave everything we had. It's a good memory and great experience. Now, we'll move on to show the fans that we can play even better in the future.
During their time in Poland, the young squad talked among themselves about gaining crucial experience from the tournament and using it to become better players.
Throughout the tournament, we all learned a lot and got better in each of our positions. When it was over, we talked about how we should continue to play well for our club teams or schools and try to meet again at a more senior level.
The squad will have a few days of rest before heading back to their respective club teams or schools. The young Taeguk Warriors thrilled fans and gave the whole country something to cheer for. Their heroics at the Under-20 World Cup are now not only written into the history books, but also etched into the hearts of the South Korean people. Kang Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's under-20 World Cup team might have fallen at the final hurdle, but their incredible run in Poland has planted an inspiring seed for the future of South Korean football. Young kids have been inspired by the likes of Lee Gang-in and hope one day to follow in their footsteps. Our Lee Seung-jae has more on South Korea's next generation of football stars.
Even with the hot summer sun beating down, the young players whiz around the football field, dreaming of one day becoming the next Lee Gang-in or even Son Heung-min. Some are as young as 6 years old, others close to finishing elementary school. While they're young, their passion for the sport is as big as the young national team that finished runner-up at the U-20 World Cup in Poland. To these young players, the U-20 World Cup gave them even more motivation to train harder.
I want to praise the South Korean team for not giving up in the final, even though they were losing 3-1.
Our big brothers were great. I want to learn play hard until the end, even if we are losing, just like they did.
The 2019 U-20 World Cup is now over, but the kids remain in awe of the passion and will that the players showed in Poland. These kids once dreamed of becoming the next Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi. But who is their role model now?
He's the youngest, but I liked how he played so hard.
With 19 of the 21 players on the U-20 roster coming from the South Korean youth system, It's an essential foundation for the future success of the senior national team. And it's hoped these very kids may one day be the future stars of South Korean football. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, moving on to other news, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the United States is taking all the actions it needs to take to make sure they understand the risks and threats posed by North Korea. Pompeo's remarks to Fox News on Sunday came as the secretary was asked why President Trump said he wouldn't allow the CIA to spy on North Korea. Asked about reports that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's half-brother Kim Jong-nam was assassinated by the North in early 2017 for being an informant for the CIA, Pompeo declined to comment on, quote, intelligence matters in any way. Now, huge protests continue in Hong Kong, despite the island's leader, Carrie Lam, issuing an apology for her handling of a highly controversial extradition bill. Protest organisers say almost 2 million people took to the streets on Sunday to demand Lam's resignation and the complete and final withdrawal of the bill. Our Go Joon-ho reports.
Hong Kong protesters dressed in black continue to demand the full and final withdrawal of the bill that would allow its citizens to be sent to mainland China for trial. According to numbers estimated by the leaders of the Civil Human Rights Front, the organizers of the protest, almost 3 out of 10 people in Hong Kong participated on Sunday, which marks the city-state's largest protest since 1989. Hong Kong police put their official estimate of the crowd size at 338,000.
I want the government to withdraw the bill, not just suspend. I'm not satisfied with this, and that's why I keep coming out.
The protests continued despite Chief Executive Carrie Lam not only suspending the bill, but also issuing an apology over the government's handling of it. On Sunday, the Hong Kong government released a statement saying Lam pledged to adopt the most sincere and humble attitude, to accept criticisms and make improvements in serving the public.
I feel deep sorrow and regret that the deficiencies in our work and various other factors have stirred up substantial controversies and dispute in society following the relatively calm periods of the past 2 years, disappointing many people.
However, protests are expected to continue as Hong Kongers are demanding Lam step down and are furious over the way police handled the demonstration. This comes as U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Sunday that President Trump would raise the issue of human rights in Hong Kong at a potential meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit in Japan set for later this month. Ko Roon-hee, Arirang News.
Now, the United States and Iran continue to point accusing fingers at each other over last week's attacks on 2 oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Hong Yu. So, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington is considering a whole range of options to deal with Iran. Tell us more about this and also Tehran's response to these accusations.
Well, Mark, Pompeo says Sunday that the U.S. is considering a full range of options, including military options to guarantee unhindered shipping through the Strait of Hormuz following last week's incidents. But Pompeo emphasized that President Trump does not want to go to war with Iran.
President Trump has done everything he can to avoid war. We don't want war. We've done what we can to deter this. The Iranians should understand very clearly that we will continue to take actions that deter Iran from engaging this kind of behavior. I made a number of calls.
Pompeo stressed that Iran was unmistakably responsible for last Thursday's attack on 2 oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman, but he said diplomacy should be used to deal with the situation. Pompeo said American officials are reaching out to colleagues around the world to share an understanding of these recent attacks, that the U.S. claims to have lots of data, lots of evidence to prove Iran was responsible. In response, the Iranian parliament speaker Ali Larijani said Sunday it was the U.S. that carried out the attacks. Larijani claims the U.S. had conducted the attacks after its economic sanctions failed to achieve their goals on Iran. He said the attacks were Washington's Plan B. The attacked oil tankers are currently anchored in the United Arab Emirates to be assessed. Damage assessment on one of the tankers, Japan's Kokuka Courageous, will start after UAE authorities complete security checks. The same goes for the other damaged oil tanker owned by a Norwegian shipping company. The specialist team will inspect the vessels for a full assessment of their condition and the damage they suffered. Iran is pressing ahead with plans to further draw down its commitments to the 2015 nuclear deal. According to Iran's state-run Tasmin news agency, local media representatives have been invited to heavy water nuclear facilities in Iraq on Monday to hear the second step Iran could take to scale back its commitments, as well as to increase its stock of enriched uranium. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani announced last month that Tehran was halting its compliance to the pact that the U.S. withdrew from last year. Iran also urged the EU to protect its economy from U.S. sanctions within 60 days of deadline. A massive blackout left all of mainland Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay without power on Sunday. An unexplained failure in the country's electrical interconnection system left more than 48 million people without power.
The subways aren't even working. You can't even recharge your transit card to ride the bus, and you can't get around if you don't have a car.
We were just with my grandmother and we had to help her down the stairs because the elevator wasn't working. Everything is closed and there's no movement in the street.
Power was restored to more than half of the region in Argentina by the afternoon and to most regions in Uruguay. Argentinian President Mauricio Macri ordered a thorough investigation on what had caused the blackout and who was responsible for it. Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris held its first Mass on Saturday since a massive fire broke out at the centuries-old place of worship in April. For security reasons, only about 30 people, including priests and church employees, participated in the service, which was held inside a side chapel left undamaged by the blaze. Worshippers wore hard hat helmets and burnt wood debris was still visible. Although it's still unknown about when the cathedral will open to the public, Father Pierre Viveres told the Associated Press that it will take a lot of time and work to rebuild the cathedral.
Now, South Korean director Bong Joon-ho's Parasite has won the Sydney Film Festival's main award, the Sydney Film Prize, just weeks after becoming the first South Korean filmmaker to win the prestigious Palme D'Or at Cannes. Bong received the Sydney Award on Sunday at the festival's closing ceremony. The festival's jury president said Parasite has an outrageous disregard for genre conventions and is a masterwork in its exploration of class. 2 years ago, Bong's previous film, Okja, was selected as the closing film at the festival. Parasite goes on nationwide release in Australia on June 27th. Now, citing the changing demographic structure here in South Korea, the Finance Ministry is raising the issue of whether the country should extend the retirement age to 65 from the current 60. Kim Hae-sung has this report.
The number of people aged over 65 is expected to increase by 480,000 each year over the next decade and surpass 10 million by 2025, when they'll account for 20% of the population in Korea. This means that the already shrinking working-age population, those aged between 15 and 64, will face a greater burden, with each one having to support an elderly person by 2065. Government spending on the elderly, including pensions, is also expected to jump by an annual average of 14.6% and top $14 billion by 2022.
Korea has the fastest aging population in the OECD. With a fertility rate below 1, this changing demographic puts a burden on the government in terms of spending and pensions that could result in a fiscal budget deficit and slower economic growth. It might be necessary to delay the retirement age, just as Japan and some European countries did a couple of years ago.
According to Statistics Korea, delaying it from 60 to 65 could postpone a spike in the elderly care burden by 9 years, but at the same time, it could shift it to private companies.
Productivity among the elderly population differs across sectors. It could benefit some high-skilled manufacturing sectors, but result in lower productivity in some service sectors. Korea just extended the retirement age to 60 in 2016. As the burden of wage payouts grows, companies might hire fewer new employees.
Data from the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs show that if the proportion of elderly people among the employed goes up by 1 percentage point, that of young people goes down by 0.8 percentage points, which could worsen the already high youth unemployment rate of around 10%. An aging population and shrinking working age population is a complicated problem that affects the labor market and the social welfare system. The Finance Ministry will announce its policy on dealing with these changing demographics later this month. 김혜성, 아리랑 뉴스.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information useful for your everyday life. And starting in July next month, the South Korean government will require all foreigners staying in South Korea for 6 months or longer to sign up for the National Health Insurance Program. Park Se-young has this report.
To prevent the free riding of healthcare services, foreigners living in Korea for 6 months or longer without an employer insurance plan will be required to enroll in the country's health insurance program. This includes Korean expatriates who return to the country for short periods, foreign students, and those married to Korean nationals. The new law, which will take effect from July 16th, requires those subject to enrollment to pay over $95 per month, which is equivalent to the average amount Korean nationals pay on a non-employer scheme. The insurance premium will vary according to household income and assets. Foreign students will be granted a discount of up to 50% and pay around $50 a month. Until now, enrollment in the National Health Insurance Program was optional for foreigners living in the country for 3 months or longer and allowed them to still benefit from the insurance. This resulted in cases of people receiving expensive treatment for relatively small sums of money and then leaving the country. The National Health Insurance Service projects some 400,000 people will be affected by the new mandatory insurance program. Those who do not comply with the new requirements and pay on time may face healthcare and visa-related penalties. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
Now, so-called health tonics sold in South Korea must change their labels to show caffeine content and warnings starting from the second half of 2020. The Ministry of Food and Drug Safety says health tonics with caffeine must have contains caffeine and people under age 15 must not consume, written in bold red on their labels. Canned coffee and energy drinks categorized as food in South Korea are already subject to such regulations. However, these kind of health tonics are categorized as quasi-drugs and did not require such labels. Some health tonics here in South Korea contain as much caffeine as Red Bull and only slightly less than Monster energy drinks. Now, South Korea's first electric double-decker bus was showcased recently at a tech fair here in Seoul. The event was designed to serve as a platform to introduce locally made technologies that could help some of South Korea's flagging industries. Jo Sang-min with the details.
This is South Korea's first ever electric double-decker bus. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport and Hyundai Motor started working on the project in 2017, and their efforts have finally come to fruition. Holding up to 71 passengers, the bus can travel as far as 700 kilometers with a 70-minute full charge of its 6-pack batteries. Safety features such as high-tech fire detectors are embedded within the bus, as well as a design that allows easy access for those with disabilities. The bus boasts a low-floor design and a built-in sliding ramp at its entrance, so a wheelchair can board the bus with convenience and ease. The implementation of a wire-free tram is also picking up speed amid the government's push to introduce eco-friendlier public transportation. The tram relies on its battery for power, so it makes less noise and less emissions. It also provides simpler and better views in the city without all the wires. These are some of the new technologies that took center stage at the 2019 Land Infrastructure and Transport Technology Fair that was recently held in Seoul. Organizers said these technologies will make sure South Korea stays on the right track to remain competitive in terms of making technological achievements.
The exhibition is designed to serve as a platform for small and mid-sized firms to not only introduce, but also to commercialize their original technologies.
Other new technologies that were displayed during the fair include a remote-controlled unmanned excavator and robots that can paint the outer walls of tall buildings. Industry experts say these new technological developments could change the working culture of some local industries and also help enhance the safety of working environments at construction sites. 조성민, Arirang News.
Now, before we get to the weather, Seoul is set to host Asia's largest animation festival in July. The 2019 Seoul International Cartoon and Animation Festival is scheduled to kick off on July 17th and run through the 21st at the COEX Convention Center in southern Seoul. Marking its 23rd year, the event will be held under the theme of innovative change and will screen 103 selected animations from 28 countries. The festival will also host booths for webtoon artists, costume play performers and animation companies. Tickets for animation screenings are available through Naver and Interpark.
Good morning. Expect a similar weather pattern to what we had over the weekend. Afternoon highs will be slightly lower than Sunday for here in the capital, but southern provinces will be hotter under sunny skies throughout the day today. Most parts will have high to very high UV rays, while parts of Gangwon province will have extreme levels during the day, so get under cover when the sun's rays are at their strongest. And air quality will be normal to good, but we will see high ozone levels in some parts of the country, and it can cause harmful health effects, including coughing and sore throat. And as for today's daily highs, Seoul will get up to 26 degrees Celsius. Daegu and Gyeongju will make it to 29 degrees this afternoon, and Busan will be breezier at 24 degrees. Now, rain is in the forecast tomorrow afternoon, which could linger into early Wednesday. Well, temperatures will also gradually rise, but there will not be any major heat wave this week. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news and weather we have for now on this Monday morning here in Seoul. Plenty more coming up here on Arirang TV. And a reminder that our next newscast is coming up at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.